Imagine a time when the world was expanding at an unprecedented rate. The seas had become highways of wealth, carrying gold, spices, and silk to the richest ports in Europe. At the center of it all was the Dutch Republic, a small nation with massive ambitions. Its people believed that hard work, trade, and innovation could conquer anything. Amsterdam was the center of the world's economy. Its harbor was a living, beating heart of global commerce. Ships from the East Indies unloaded exotic treasures, and every merchant dreamed of striking it rich. But among all the symbols of power and prosperity that filled these bustling canals, one stood out: the tulip, delicate, colorful, and utterly useless. The tulip. No one could have guessed that this fragile flower would one day command the price of a mansion. The Dutch Golden Age was an era not only of science and exploration, but also of obsession. Beauty was a form of currency in those years. The tulip arrived in Europe from the Ottoman Empire around the mid-1500s. Its fiery petals, streaked with red, gold, and purple, were unlike anything Europeans had ever seen. In a land that prided itself on order and restraint, the tulip's colors seemed wild, exotic, and forbidden. Owning a tulip became a statement of taste, wealth, and power. First it was collectors and botanists who adored them, then the aristocrats. But by the 1630s, tulips had become something else entirely, a financial instrument. They became a symbol of speculation. Something extraordinary was happening in the streets of Amsterdam. The world's first modern market was being born. The Dutch had invented a financial system unlike anything seen before. They had the first stock exchange and the first public company, the Dutch East India Company, as well as the first futures contracts. They were inventing capitalism as we know it. Within this feverish environment, tulips fit perfectly. People didn't just want to own tulips, they wanted to trade them. The rarest bulbs, especially those infected by a virus that caused their patterns to break into stripes, were considered priceless. They even had names: Semper Augustus, Viceroy, and Admiral of Admirals. These bulbs became status symbols, passed between merchants like pieces of gold. However, the tulip market soon became detached from reality. People began buying bulbs they'd never seen with money they didn't have at prices no one could justify. Farmers sold their land to buy tulips. Sailors spent their life savings on contracts for bulbs that hadn't even been planted yet. The market shifted from flowers to paper promises, tulip futures. A single Semper Augustus bulb could sell for over 10 times the average annual income of a skilled craftsman. Some bulbs changed hands dozens of times in a single day, with each buyer believing that there would always be someone willing to pay more. Coffee houses and taverns became trading floors. A painter might sell his canvases and a baker might sell his shop, just to own a contract for a flower he might never touch. The strangest part? Almost everyone believed it made sense. After all, tulip prices had never fallen before. The logic of the crowd became the truth of the market. Fear of missing out, the same emotion that drives investors today, took over. Everyone wanted to get in before it was too late. Then came the winter of 1636. The market was at its peak. Prices were rising by the hour, but something subtle was shifting. The smartest traders began to quietly and carefully sell. They noticed that buyers were hesitating and that fewer people were showing up to auctions. Then, in February of 1637, it happened. In the city of Haarlem, a routine tulip auction failed. No one was willing to pay the last recorded price. Within days, panic spread across the country. People realized the truth. These numbers had no intrinsic value. They weren't trading flowers anymore, they were trading dreams. And the dream was over. Prices fell almost overnight. Contracts became worthless. Those who thought they were millionaires found themselves in debt. Bulbs that once sold for 5,000 guilders could barely fetch 50. Some went bankrupt. Others disappeared entirely. Stories spread of ruined families and merchants who took their own lives. Though many of these tales were exaggerated by later historians, the emotional devastation was real. Fascinatingly, though, the Dutch economy didn't collapse as one might have expected. The banks remained intact, trade continued, and the Republic moved on. While Tulip Mania was dramatic, it was not a total financial disaster. It was a psychological one. It revealed something fundamental about human behavior. our endless capacity to believe that this time it's different. Even after the collapse, the fascination remained. Writers and philosophers of the time mocked the mania. Pamphlets were printed warning against greed and foolishness. The tulip became a moral symbol, teaching lessons about vanity, speculation, and excess. Yet, as the centuries passed, we repeated the same cycle again and again. Consider the South Sea bubble of the 1720s, for example, which promised easy riches through British trade but spectacularly burst. In the 19th century, railway mania gripped England. Investors poured money into lines that would never be built. Then, in the 1920s, Wall Street turned into a casino. People mortgaged their homes to buy stocks, convinced that the future could only go up. Then, in 1929, the crash came. In the late 1990s, it was the internet. In the 2000s, it was housing. In the 2020s, it's crypto and NFTs. The pattern is ancient, but the setting keeps changing. When Bitcoin soared from a few $100s to nearly $70,000, people said the same thing Dutch traders once said about tulips. This is a revolution. This is the future. It can't go down. When NFTs sold for millions, including pictures of monkeys and digital art that could easily be copied, we heard the same justifications. It's about scarcity. It's about culture. It's about status. But beneath it all, the psychology hasn't changed. The fear of missing out, the rush of belonging to something extraordinary, and the thrill of effortless profit. Yet just as in the 1630s, the fall is inevitable. No market can escape gravity forever. Value must eventually return to reality. More than any economic theory, Tulip Mania teaches us that markets are not rational machines. They are reflections of human emotion. They are driven not just by money, but also by hope, fear, and greed. Every bubble starts with something real and valuable and ends with an illusion. In the case of tulips, the truth was beauty. They were a rare flower that captured the imagination of a nation. The illusion was that beauty could be endlessly monetized. In the case of cryptocurrency, the truth was technology. In housing, it was stability. In .coms, it was innovation. However, once a story grows larger than its substance, its downfall becomes unavoidable. Nevertheless, there's a paradox. Bubbles aren't entirely bad. They leave behind infrastructure, innovation, and progress. After Tulip Mania, for example, the Dutch improved their financial markets. Following the dot-com crash, Google and Amazon emerged. Following the crypto boom, blockchain technology emerged and continues to evolve. In every mania, humanity learns, adapts, and moves forward. But we also forget, quickly. The next time a new asset promises unimaginable wealth, the lessons of the past fade into the background. The charts look different, the technology seems new, and the hype feels justified. We tell ourselves stories to drown out doubt. Then history, patient and relentless, reminds us again that greed has no memory. So what can we really learn from the tulip bubble? Perhaps it's not about avoiding risk entirely. After all, risk drives progress. Perhaps it's about understanding our own limits. It's about knowing when excitement turns to delusion. Markets aren't just numbers, they're mirrors. They reveal who we are when money is on the line. The Dutch traders of the 1600s didn't have smartphones or stock apps, but their emotions were the same as ours. They dreamed of a better life, of quick success, and of escaping the grind through a single lucky bet. Perhaps that's what makes Tulip Mania so timeless. It's not just about flowers, it's about people. People like us. The next time you see a chart rising faster than seems reasonable, remember Amsterdam in the winter of 1637. Remember the merchants who traded dreams for bulbs. Remember how the world's most rational society lost itself in the pursuit of the irrational. Because behind every bubble and number is a story of human desire, beautiful, dangerous, and eternal. Perhaps the real lesson of Tulip Mania isn't that markets fall. It's that we always think we're the exception. We always think we're smarter than the previous generation. But like a quiet whisper through time, history keeps reminding us that the flower always fades, but the roots of greed remain the same.